What's up, everybody? How are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today I want to talk about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which is only a mere 6 or 7 months away, and compare it to Zelda Breath of the Wild and whether or not Tears of the Kingdom has a real chance at being better than Breath of the Wild. One of the main reasons I wanted to talk about this today is because at first thought, you might think that without question, Tears of the Kingdom will be the better game because it's the newer game and Breath of the Wild is 5.5 years old. And I understand that, and I think there's a great chance that that will be the case, and I'm obviously going to be talking about that today. But I also think it's worth reminding everyone we can't forget just how absolutely incredible, mind-blowing, and game-changing Breath of the Wild was when it released 5.5 years ago in March of 2017. You know, that game released, and that first probably 2 or 3 weeks when all of us were playing it together, and everyone was having a very different experience, finding different secrets and weird things within Hyrule, and every one of us completed the Great Plateau and then chose a different direction to jump off of, and then head that way within the world of Hyrule, uncovering that map for the first time, discovering just how incredible that world of Hyrule was. It was so amazing, and it literally did change the game in so many ways. Nowadays, it's 5 years old. That experience may feel like old hat and old news because we did it so long ago and everyone is so used to everything that we all know about the game that I think something that happens to a lot of folks is we sort of forget what that initial impression was like. And that initial impression is one of the most important aspects to a game's quality and its legacy. Yes, it's a timeless game that can be played over and over again, and there's tons of secrets to find. It's damn near impossible to 100% that game, although I'm sure many people out there have, who are just insane game players and have all sorts of free time to be able to do so. But it truly was an important and game-changing experience. Now, with Tears of the Kingdom, it has two things to deal with, you know, good and bad. One is the fact that it's going to be able to perfect an already perfect game and perfect experience. But one thing kind of working against it is the fact that it's not going to bring along with it all of the newness and freshness and exciting elements that Breath of the Wild introduced into the Zelda franchise, and even introduced into gaming and the open world genre in a lot of ways. And so that's what's really interesting when we analyze Tears of the Kingdom, you know, many months before any of us have played it. And the fact that it's going to improve on perfection, but also won't bring all of the newness and freshness that the first game did introduce. And so that puts it in a really weird and unique scenario. So of course, we'll all have different unique thoughts on this whole thing, but I will just tell you that my personal opinion and my personal prediction, because again, I haven't played Tears of the Kingdom, and none of you have played Tears of the Kingdom. So my personal opinion and my personal prediction is that I kind of do think, in rare form for me, I kind of do think that Tears of the Kingdom will end up being the better game. And I say in rare form for me because I am someone who is very attached to my nostalgia of gaming and movies and whatnot. And when I think back to when a game was its newest and its freshest and its most relevant to the time it released, that's usually how I tend to remember the quality of a video game or a video game console or a movie or whatever. To me, that's how I do stuff. A lot of people don't do that, and they just think about what's the newest, what's the most improved, and so that's the best, right? A perfect example for me would be the Super Mario Galaxy games. There are 2 Mario Galaxy games. If you were to break down, ultimately, in 2022, what's the best, most creative, most content-rich of those 2 games, it's Mario Galaxy 2. By checking boxes, Mario Galaxy 2 checks more boxes than Mario Galaxy 1. However, I think Mario Galaxy 1 is the better game. It's the game that I prefer, and if I'm going to rank Mario games, I'm going to rank Mario Galaxy higher than Galaxy 2. Not because it's like the better game, quote unquote, because, you know, by 2022 standards, yes, both games are very old, but Mario Galaxy 2 is a newer, fresher game, right? Or even Mario Odyssey by comparison. But the reason Galaxy rises above for me is because of what it was like when Mario Galaxy was its newest in 2007, as opposed to Galaxy 2 being the newest in 2010, or even Mario Odyssey in 2017 when it was its newest. I think in there, when you compare their respective release years, Mario Galaxy was the most interesting, the most surprising, the most fun, the most creative, and so for that reason, I still enjoy it the most, even though Galaxy 2 did improve on it. And in many ways, Mario Odyssey improved on both of those games, even though I actually rank Mario Odyssey lower than both of those games. You guys know me, I love Mario Odyssey, but I think it's a bit overrated. But, you know, and so that's the point I'm making and how I personally look at games, right? Like, I think Ocarina of Time is better than many newer Zelda games that came after it, such as Twilight Princess. Even though Twilight Princess is a more modern game that looks better and plays a little bit more modernly and is more timeless, my experience with Ocarina of Time when I was 18 years old in 1998 can never be eclipsed by most other Zelda games, including games that came after it, like Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess, games that I think are also fantastic. And so this is a tangent, but of course is also related to, I think, the larger topic at hand when we compare Breath of the Wild to the upcoming Tears of the Kingdom. This is a very, very long way for me to say Breath of the Wild's impact upon its release in 2017 is so important to the pantheon of gaming history and to the Legend of Zelda series and its own specific pantheon that I will never forget that first 2 to 4 weeks when that game was fresh and I just played it and I tried to discover as much as I could, and I didn't want to beat it because I wanted it to be new and fresh and I wanted to find things to discover for as long as humanly possible. That game was and still is amazing. And so how could Tears of the Kingdom possibly improve on that or be a better game? Well, honestly, going back to how I started this conversation, I do still think that Tears of the Kingdom has a chance at, for me, still being the better game. And so for me and my personal tastes when it comes to gaming and when it comes to Zelda games, the reason I think Tears of the Kingdom might be the better game for me is because of really one specific key gameplay element. And it is the sky element. The flying, the floating, the diving off of cliffs, all of the floating islands, the chunks of Hyrule that seem to have been lifted out of the ground and posted in the sky for us to hopefully be able to, like, jump to and fly across to and ride on these, like, floating disc things that we've seen in that last teaser, and to be able to traverse the sky as well as the amazing open world Hyrule below. I think that combination is going to deliver on what Skyward Sword started to do way back in 2011. And that element alone just appeals to my personal gaming principles and tastes so much that I'm just freaking out over how exciting that is. Now, you know, there's a chance that they don't maybe deliver on it the way I want them to. And if that happens, I don't think it's going to ruin the game, but what it might do is prevent it from being the better game in my personal eyes. But I want to just believe that they're going to deliver on it in such a way that I think it's going to just blow me away. In order for them to deliver on this idea, for me it has to do a couple of specific things. One is it has to maintain an absolutely phenomenal ground open world, right? The ground, the earth below where Hyrule is located. If they do something where it's like very close to the same map that we all know from Breath of the Wild, and we can recognize some locations and buildings and areas to go to, but if they've changed the topography so significantly that it's familiar yet also different, that will be incredible, okay? Because it's got that familiar and also fresh feeling at the same time, which will be awesome. Because that first Hyrule map in Breath of the Wild is literally the best open world I've ever personally experienced. You know, that along with Skyrim, they're the two best and most interesting open worlds I've ever personally played. And so if you make it the same but also different, that is so cool. And then if you add this like floating layer to discover above, and if it's significant, if there's a lot of real estate for us to discover in the floating islands below, and if early on in the game it becomes easy enough for us to traverse and travel across those islands, it's just going to be so incredible. You have the same great game-changing map from 2017, but you also change it up so it feels fresh, and then you add this flying, floating, extra, like, sky layer of real estate to discover above that. You're basically, like, tripling the amount of content and places to discover and explore in such a fresh way, because it'll be so cool and exciting to be able to be on one of these huge floating islands above Hyrule and to be able to look below and actually see the ground that you could jump off of and go land on. That's something that, again, going back to Skyward Sword in 2011, the technology, the power of the Wii, I love Skyward Sword, don't get me wrong, but the technology wasn't there for them to really be able to do that, right? They had to kind of create this artificial loading barrier of the clouds below Skyloft and then the sky above Hyrule. And you had to like choose specific warp points to kind of go, between the ground and the sky. And it loaded in between, and it was fine. It was great for the time, and I loved it even when they re-released it on the Switch. Like, I freaking love and will always defend Skyward Sword. But they couldn't really deliver on that sky flying, floating mechanic the same way. Now, in 2023, when this game releases, on the Switch, or even a next-gen Switch, if it happens to have something to do with new hardware at the same time, it's a whole different ballgame. And they can take that concept and do something so amazing. They can deliver on the early promise of 2011's Skyward Sword. And it's just something that when I think about it, if they do it the way I think they can do it, it just gives me chills, like nerdy, geeky chills, right? Of just, this is how I want to experience my open world, sky-based Legend of Zelda game. And, there's the story elements, and I love the story of the Zelda franchise. I love the lore and the history of it. I don't know it so intimately the same way I do like Metroid's lore and story, but I still know it very well. I think it's really exciting and interesting. I think that this game is going to have this pseudo connection, obviously to Breath of the Wild, and maybe Calamity Ganon is being resurrected or whatever, but I think it's very clearly going to connect in story ways to Skyward Sword. And I can't yet really think of ways that they could connect it to that. The Goddess of Hylia and the first versions of Link and Zelda and how that became the Breath of the Wild versions. And Age of Calamity added a whole time travel wrinkle to it, and so it starts to get really kind of confusing, I'm not gonna lie. And I loved Age of Calamity, don't get me wrong. I said from the first teaser of now Tears of the Kingdom, at the time it was Breath of the Wild 2, they showed that flashing silhouette of someone on the wall, and everyone is like, oh, it's Ganon, oh, it's Fierce Deity Link or whatever. And I'm like, that looks like Demise to me. So I would love it if there's a Demise connection in some way, which would connect it to Skyward Sword. So I don't know. That's very interesting. Maybe I make a different video later as we get closer to the game talking about story implications. I just want to talk about comparing these two games. So when we compare them, Breath of the Wild has the legacy of being so fresh, the freshest experience to the Zelda series for the first time since probably Wind Waker. And it also has just that impact of everyone having such an amazing experience and winning all these awards and changing up how Zelda played in an open world. But then Tears of the Kingdom has to build on that. It's the same engine, the same core gameplay mechanics, but hopefully it's going to be bigger, better, and fresher by adding the sky element, and hopefully all these new gameplay powers that change it up in such a way so it's both an advantage that it's improving on perfection, but also a hindrance that it's not going to feel as fresh. And so will the freshness of Breath of the Wild make that the better game, or will the improvements of Tears of the Kingdom make that the better game? It's obviously too early to tell. And for me, I don't need Tears of the Kingdom to be the better game for me to still love it or think it's amazing. But it is fun to talk about here, again, as we're 6-7 months away from the game's release. I think soon after the new year, we're probably going to get some sort of big Treehouse or Nintendo Direct presentation, and the doors are going to get blown open for Tears of the Kingdom. I've been talking about that for a very long time, and now that we know the game is confirmed for May 12th next year, I think that pretty quickly in January or February, Nintendo's going to start to really tell us more about this game and give us huge gameplay segments and give us hints at the story and let us understand what that sky element and the floating islands element of this game is really going to be like. And then we might be able to have a clearer picture of if Tears of the Kingdom will be the better game or if Breath of the Wild will still reign supreme at the end of the day. It's a very exciting time. I can't wait to play Tears of the Kingdom, and I am thrilled that it's only a few months away.